Well, hello, my friends and fellow Invisible College members. And today we're going to do something a little bit different. Instead of investigating ancient mysteries, which is most of what I do, or discussing things like the Book of Revelation, we're going to look at something much more personal to us all, which is the whole question of dreams. And this lecture, I've given it a title here, The Secret to Having Prophetic Dreams. And you might be wondering, how can there be a secret to having prophetic dreams? Don't they just happen? Well, there's a lot more to it than that. So buckle up and we'll go into this subject, and we're going to actually analyze everything that you need to know really about dreams and where they come from. So the secret to having prophetic dreams. And I'm going to use one of the most famous dreamers or interpreters of dreamers actually in the Bible, which is the prophet Daniel. And if you've already watched my little lectures on the book of Daniel, you'll know quite a bit about this guy. He was an amazing person, amazing in his visions and his dreams for what was going to happen in the future, right up to our own time. In fact, you could call the book of Daniel the prequel to the book of Revelation, which is perhaps better known, the Apocalypse of St. John. The Apocalypse of St. John is really an extension of the book of Daniel. So we're going to look a little bit at the whole subject of dreams, and we're going to use Daniel as an example and an inspiration. Now, one of the greatest of the biblical prophets was Daniel. Taken as a youth to Babylon by King Nebuchadnezzar, he rose from the position of captive hostage to that of vizier to not just Nebuchadnezzar, but also later to the Persian king Cyrus. The transfer to Babylon happened because the Babylonians invaded Judea and they took captives from Jerusalem. First of all, they took just the princes and the educated, or the upper class, you could say. And later on, they came back and they took a lot more people and they destroyed the city. So with Daniel, in part, this was down to his obvious character as a true servant of the divine. In later life, he was able to see and receive messages directly from the angels. All this is covered in my earlier lectures on Daniel, which I link to below. Actually, the book of Daniel tells us probably most that we learn about Saint Michael and the angel Gabriel. He met both of those personages, in different times. So he's a very important prophet. Most of them don't actually meet angels as such. So he was really connected. However, the key to his early success was his ability to receive and interpret dreams. In this lecture, we'll investigate this aspect of Daniel's career. Now then, Nebuchadnezzar was the most powerful of all the kings of the Neo-Babylonian Empire. He raided Jerusalem in 605 BC and again in 597 BC. In 586 BC, he destroyed the temple, slew the royal princes, and took the last king of Judah back in chains to Babylon. Already blinded, he was put to death. That's the last king, Zedekiah. Daniel had been one of a number of gifted and educated young Jews to be taken to Babylon in 605. Here they were to be taught the local language, to read and write cuneiform. That's the script that they used in Mesopotamia, right back from the Sumerian period. And the Babylonians and the Assyrians, a lot of other people actually used cuneiform, including the Persians, for quite a long time. And learn all about Babylonian science, art, and culture. In essence, they were to be trained to become useful administrators in what was a growing multi-ethnic empire. So, we look upon the taking of prisoners by the Babylonians as enslavement, which it was, I suppose, but it was also a question of they wanted more people to administer things, to work in the fields, to become artisans in the city itself. And they wanted to integrate them and turn them into Babylonians. So it wasn't quite as, the sort of brutal under the lash slavery that we think of necessarily. I'm sure that happened too. But it was also a question of trying to build up their population to have more people that could do important jobs. And certainly Daniel was in that category. Daniel was abnormally gifted and potentially the best of the crop. However, he hung on to his own religion tenaciously, and this would put his life at risk. You've heard of Daniel in the lion's den, for instance, and the fiery furnace and all of that. It was a very dangerous thing not to toe the line where these kings who had total power, these autocrats, like Nebuchadnezzar, were concerned. But Nebuchadnezzar himself, he got to like Daniel, and well, you'll see. One night, Nebuchadnezzar had a disturbing dream that he couldn't remember. We've all had those, haven't we? You wake up and you think, I had an awful dream and I can't remember what it was. It was really upsetting. Well, that happened to the king. He called on the wise men of the kingdom, and they tell us who these were: the magicians, the enchanters, the sorcerers, and the Chaldeans, to interpret it for him. So he's got a team of people together. He's got enchanters, he's got magicians, he's got sorcerers. What are sorcerers? Well, they're people that practice witchcraft of one sort or another, cast spells. So he's got these spell people and the Chaldeans, who are astrologers in the main, but the fortune tellers of one sort or another, to help interpret his dream for him. And naturally, since he couldn't, or maybe he wouldn't, tell them what he had dreamt, they were unable to interpret it. They were no help, even though he threatened them and their families with death. And you've got to feel for these guys, The king says, interpret my dream for me. And they say, yeah, of course. What was it? We can interpret it for you. And he said, well, I don't know. Interpret it. What can you do? I wouldn't like to be in that situation, and I'm sure you wouldn't. Begged him, well, tell us what it was and we can interpret it. I'm not going to tell you. I can't remember. So they're in a fix. Eventually, word came to Daniel, and he went to the king. He volunteered his service to do the impossible. He was going to interpret the dream, but he was going about it in a totally different way. Then he prayed to his God that he should be given the dream too. In other words, he was a Jew, and he believed in God. He believed in the God of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. People of Judah were it's actually a couple of tribes derived from the original 12 tribes of Israel. But that's a whole other story. But they believed in this God. There's one God whose name could not be mentioned, only written as the Tetragrammaton. And his God, which is the same God that we pray to if we're Christians or Jews today, he prayed to him to give him the dream. That done, he went to bed. Sure enough, he had an extraordinary and prophetic dream. Daniel was able to tell the king that his dream concerned a symbolic statue. It had a head of gold, arms and chest of silver, hips and thighs of bronze, legs of iron, and toes of a mixture of iron mixed with clay. So he's able to tell the king, this is what you dreamt. And this statue symbolized a period of time when a number of empires would come and go. The golden head symbolized Babylon itself. The silver, an empire which would take over. A bronze one would come next, to be followed by an even more powerful iron empire. And this too would eventually fail and be replaced by a number of legacy kingdoms. And these would have some of the iron strength, but be brittle like clay. So that's the feet and toes. When it says clay, you've got to think about clay as in pots, baked clay, which is strong, but it's brittle. And the iron gives much more strength, like in reinforced concrete. So there's some strength there, but it's not as much as the iron legs. And Nebuchadnezzar's dream was of the utmost importance. It represented a time period of 2,520 years. That's 7 times 360. So 7 periods of prophetic years of 360 days, each day being a year. So the whole lot comes to 2,520, during which a succession of world empires would rule the Middle East, and especially Jerusalem. Neither the king nor Daniel could know this, but these empires came to pass. Actually, Daniel did come to see not just the golden-haired Babylon, but the second empire, or the early part of it, which was the Medo-Persian Empire. When the Medes and Persians conquered Babylon in 539 BC. Daniel was still there at the time, and he then served the first king of Babylon, the Persian king, which was Cyrus II, Cyrus the Great. So very important. And so he saw the beginnings of the fulfillment of his major prophecy. But he didn't know the Bronze Empire was going to be the Greek Empire of Alexander the Great, when they conquered Persia in 330 BC. And then the Iron Empire would be the Roman Empire, which conquered the part of the Middle East where Judea is, or Jerusalem, in 27 BC. And then the feet and toes represented successor states that came after the Roman Empire. To understand how Daniel was able to dream this information, we need to look closely at the origins of dreams. So I'm going to take us now into dream analysis and how I think you should start viewing dreams and how you should start considering your own dreams and putting them into a larger context. You'll understand them much better that way. So let's begin at the beginning. Where do dreams come from? To answer this question, we have to understand that we're only partly conscious. This is true even when we're awake. So there's a lot of unconscious things going on with you all the time. And so we're not conscious of much or even most of what goes on inside. Our body breathes, our heart beats, our thoughts are triggered by memories and chance words. At night time, when our conscious mind is asleep, our unconscious is still very much active. Now we're going to look at what Carl Jung, the greatest psychoanalyst of dreams, at least in modern times. And we're going to look at his ideas a little bit. You know, this is a huge subject in itself. I've read most of his books, and I've put into practice his techniques for studying your dreams. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that, but if you want to go into the full-on Jungian thing, you'll have to read the books for yourself. He recognized that the conscious mind, what we think of as our identity, floats on a sea of unconscious activity and thought. Furthermore, he understood that what motivates us is mostly unconscious as well. So we think we're doing things rationally. We think about things, we work things out, and then we act on what we've worked out logically. But that's actually not true. Much of the time, most of the time, we're driven by unconscious motivations. We're driven by anxieties or like or dislike or lusts. These things drive people, and they know that they shouldn't do this, but they can't control it. It's all in the unconscious. So you need to get to grips with what this unconscious mind is all about. Jung took psychology into new depths with his understanding that the unconscious mind has different levels. So now we're starting to see that it's not all just one big sea of unconsciousness on which our conscious mind is floating. There are levels to this unconscious. And first of all, we have a personal unconscious, which is unique to us. Its contents are personal and consist of forgotten memories, experiences, habits, learned knowledge, fantasies, and yes, dreams. So that's all our personal unconscious. This is Jung's system. I'm going to elaborate a little bit more than Jung did as we go on, but this is how we saw things. You have a personal unconscious, which is, your own unconscious, you could say. And your personal unconscious is different from mine. You've had different experiences in your life. You have different memories from those. You've got different habits from me. You've learnt different things from me. And your fantasies, some of them are going to be different from mine. He also recognized that our unconscious mind also has a universal aspect. It has contents that are shared by all people. In particular, there are archetypal images, processes, and drives that are shared by all people. He called this the collective unconscious. So this is in a deeper level. We all have certain contents that we have access to that belong to mankind as a whole. They're not us personally. And there are desires, there are dreams. When I shouldn't use that word, fantasies would be better, of success. And a lot of these things, he discussed this a lot in his books about making these things conscious. And he talked about archetypes and how these archetypes are represented very often in fairy tales. And he did a lot of work on this, on the ideals of fairy tales, how stories like Sleeping Beauty or Cinderella or, Rumpelstiltskin, these tales which have come down to us, they have such a grip on us, and they can continue from generation to generation just because these are collective archetypes: the king, the beautiful princess, the wicked dwarf, the wicked witch. These kind of archetypes are shared by all of humanity in one way or another. So they belong in the collective unconscious mind. And I would like to take this a stage further, for I believe there is also a universal level of the unconscious that is not even human, right? It relates to the mind of God. So I'm going to take this into a little bit, even a deeper level than the human collective unconscious, and say that there is the, to us, unconscious mind of the entire universe, which is the mind of the Creator, the mind of God. And that actually is what all religions are about, are about seeking connection with this mind, with our Creator. If you don't think we have a Creator, well, you're not being scientific, let's say it that way. Just take a look around you and tell me that everything you see, including your own body, your own kidneys, your own liver, your own eyes, brain, all working harmoniously together, is the result of accidents, accidental mutations. It's nonsense, absolute nonsense, and actually a huge insult to the mind that did create you, the mind of God. But this is not a religious lecture, so let's press on and see where this takes us. So I've done my own diagram here, and as you can see, the main division on the left there is between the conscious mind and the unconscious. So the conscious mind, we've got waking consciousness, normally with the body awake and under the control of the waking mind. Yeah, so that's normal day-to-day activity. You're awake, you're doing stuff, you're reading things, you're watching TV, you're playing tennis, whatever you do. Now, I would add another aspect to this, that you can be awake while asleep too. And what do I mean by that? Well, this includes lucid dreaming. Now, what's lucid dreaming? Lucid dreaming is when you wake up in a dream. And this, you can train yourself to do this, you know, but it does happen to everyone sometimes. So you spontaneously wake up in your dream. You know, I'm dreaming, and here I am. I'm awake, and I can fly. And you can actually make things happen in your dream consciously, because you're awake in your dream. It's a very odd thing to say, but you know, you probably have experienced this at some time or other in your life. Then there are out-of-body experiences. Well, you've read a lot about that, I'm sure, that people come out of their body very often in a near-death experience, or when they're on the operating table and they've been injected with drugs to, you know, make them unconscious, and suddenly they find they've popped out of their body and they're looking down at this this body lying either on the bed or in the operating theatre, and they can hear what people are saying, and they suddenly realize that they're awake while their body is asleep. And astral travel is when stage further, you're in your dream body or astral body. Astra doesn't mean star in this context. It can mean star, but only because stars are light. So astra or asta actually means a light. It's your body of light, and that's what you travel in, and that's what you leave your body in after death. And in near-death experiences, you'll still have an attachment to your body, although you've left it. And you can, and people report on this, if you go on YouTube, you'll find dozens of videos of people who've had near-death experiences, or they died for a period of time, and then they went to heaven. They met God, or they met angels, or they met this, that, or the other, or they went the other way. They were in a terrible, horrible hell place, and they were begging for help. Eventually, help came, or whatever. These experiences out of the body in a different layer of existence from our physical existence. People report on that, and they're conscious in that. When they come back, they can tell people all about it, what they saw, what they heard, what they were told, what they were taught, and how they traveled through a tube of light and this sort of thing. You've heard of these stories, and if you haven't, there's dozens of videos out there. Look for near-death experiences or out of body, and you'll find them. Now then, the unconscious mind. The first level is the body unconscious, and I would add this to Jung's system, and you get dreams that are related actually to the body itself. So your body can project into your mind, your sleeping mind, dreams that it wants you to take note of. For example, that you need to go to the toilet. And I've had this many times. You're in your dream and you're looking for a toilet. You need to go to the bathroom and you can't find one or something. And then eventually you wake up and you realize, I actually do need to go. And you get up and you go to the loo. But it can be other things, you know. Your body might be in some kind of difficulty and you need to wake up to deal with that. And your body can wake you up that way. So I call that the body unconscious. I don't know exactly which part of the brain projects those dreams. Probably the top end of the spinal cord, I would think. But we all can get these kind of dreams, and I'm sure you've had them too. Below that, the personal unconscious mind, and this is the one that Jung was talking about, the personal unconscious, dreams related to personal issues. Example, current worries about work. You might have dreams about your work. Whatever's personal issues, you may well have dreams about that, about your personal obsessions, or the place you really would like to live, or the girl that you really fancy, and you start dreaming about her. This is your personal unconscious mind, or if you're a woman, the guy you really fancy. It's nobody else will get that dream. It's your dream. It's related to your own personal issues. And then the collective unconscious mind gives you dreams of an archetypal nature. For example, royalty. You might dream about meeting the Queen. Well, she's passed on now. Well, you still might meet her in your dreams. Or sort of unconscious, the nightmares fit in this category. Very often it's a shadow figure, a monster that's pursuing you. That's a collective archetype of all people. The dragon that's after you, the crocodiles living under the bed, if you're a small child, these are archetypal images that belong in the collective unconscious mind. And they can, well, I won't say invade your unconscious because they're part of it. But those kind of images, archetypal manifestations in your dreams, are a lot of what Jung's work was all about, was about making those conscious and integrating them into what he called the self. But that you would have to study Jungian thought to really put all that together. So these kind of universal dreams that everybody gets that belong to the unconscious mind of humanity, and they manifest mostly in archetypal form. But I put another level below that, is the mind of the divinity. And that includes messages that are sent by the divinity, e.g. prophecy. And Daniel's dream, where he was dreaming of this statue with the golden head and so on, that was very much a dream that was sent from that level of prophecy. And it was really all about the succession of world empires that was going to characterize human history, at least in the West, for 2,520 years. And we've actually come out of that period now. It actually ended in 1917. But that doesn't mean we're out of the woods, does it? Look at what's happened in the 20th century and now into the 21st since then. Yeah, we're not out of the woods yet. But that's where prophecy comes from. It's sent into your mind, and it comes either directly from the divinity as an image of the divine, or through an angelic image, the angels acting as emissaries. The word angel actually means a messenger. So the angels, if you dream of an angel and they're telling you something, well, that is a messenger conveying the message. So that's also how dreams from the divinity can be manifested in your mind. So how to interpret your dreams? First, you must analyze where the particular dream has come from. So I've given you this idea that there are all these different levels. You see here, is it a body conscious, unconscious dream, or it's coming from your personal unconscious mind, or the collective unconscious mind, or the mind of the divinity? You need to work out just where that dream is coming from. So, is it a body dream stemming from your physical self? Such dreams can be warning signs that all is not well with your body and you need to wake up so that you can take care of it. Is the dream coming from your personal unconscious? Many, perhaps most of our dreams are of this type. We process our experiences of the day and also thoughts we have had, books we have read, television we have watched, and so on. So all of that has to be processed during your sleep. Your brain has to process it, and that can manifest that processing as dreams. And very often, those kind of dreams are just basically your body getting rid of stuff. Just like you physically have to go to the toilet to get rid of stuff that's been processed, so you have to do the same thing with these kind of experiences. Otherwise, your brain's going to get too cluttered with empty thoughts and confusion. So your brain has to sort all this out, so it can refresh itself. And you might have dreams related to all of that processing. Is it an archetypal dream connected with the collective unconscious of our tribe, nation, race, or mankind in general? Such archetypes can be overpowering, especially when they're not integrated properly. So in Jungian psychology, he was dealing with a lot of sick people like schizophrenics, and he was helping them deal with these fears, phobias, and things like that were archetypal manifestations invading their consciousness. And he'd have to help them or bring these things into a situation where they can be assimilated and put in their rightful place, so that the person could recover from whatever this thing was that was obsessing them. So those archetypal dreams can be also to help you do that, to begin to work out deep processes in your unconscious. And it is unconscious. You don't know what's going on. You don't see yourself as other people see you. It's a cliche, and that's true. We don't see our own faults very often. And it comes as a shock to us when people point them out to us. Some of your faults, I'm sure you're only too aware of. The funny thing is that when it comes to sin, sin is a failure of not living up to the right standard, if you call it that. And people don't just sin arbitrarily. We all the things that are our failings are always our failings. We're always fighting the same battle against the same things, because the same archetypes are the ones which are puzzling and unconscious for us. The things that are a problem for one person are not necessarily a problem for another. And we're blind to our own failings, which come to haunt us. So this dealing with archetypes is very much to do with that, and sorting out and confronting the shadow side of ourselves that we can't see. We can't see our own dark side of our nature. Other people can, but we don't. We don't see how we're lazy, perhaps, or unkind in what we say, or can't be trusted. Things like this. And the temptation is to blame everything onto other people, blame them for our own failings, to project outside of ourselves the things that are our own problem. And I think a magnificent example of this is the whole thing that's going on now with Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. The extraordinary things he's written in his book, and everybody else reading that book looks at it and says, well, actually, he's projecting a lot of this. He needs to deal with it himself. But that's another story. And I did watch that cartoon, what do they call it, with the little characters, cut out characters, publicity tour. It wasn't a publicity tour, was it? It was a privacy tour. You've probably seen that. Very, very funny, because it was pointing out the whole nature of their their obliviousness to how they're coming over to the world in general, their obliviousness to the shadow. And we're all like that in one way or another. So these archetypal dreams are very much connected with getting to grips with our own weaknesses and seeing them for what they are and trying to deal with them. But then we have the least common as dreams coming from a higher realm, which is to say from God. Such dreams are more than archetypal, they are life-changing. In this category lies prophecy. So if you want to have prophetic dreams, that's where they're going to come from. And if you don't believe in God, you probably aren't going to have them. Now then, I want to take you to someone else here, who I regard as was a very great man. I would love to have met him in the 17th century. So those of you who have been following my work over the past few years will know that one of my great heroes is Robert Flood. Indeed, I regard him as one of my teachers. Yeah, I do. I learned from his work, and I would not be surprised if he helps me in some way from the spirit. Incidentally, his house where he lived is only about 10 miles from where I live, so not that far. And I've been to the church where he's buried, and there's a monument, a memorial of him there. So in my opinion, his work is of huge significance, even though it is 400 years since he was writing his books. He was born during the reign of Elizabeth I and would have been about 29 or 30 when she died in 1603. A self-proclaimed Rosicrucian, his principal works were probably penned a few years before 1620, during the period of the Rosicrucian furore, leading on to the outbreak of the 30 Years' War. Flood's books are replete with wonderful prints and line drawings, and I've shown some of these in earlier lectures. This one focuses on the divisions of the mind and how different parts of the brain operate. We don't need to go into this in detail here, but it is clear he saw the front of the head as concerned with sense consciousness and the rear as the center of memory. So you can see there the kind of circle here. I don't know if my pointer works, if you can see it, but it has here mundus sensibilis, that means world of the senses. So that's to do with touch, tacitus, did he call it? Odoratus, odors, smell, visual, sight, hearing, the world of the five senses, in other words, processed by the front brain. That's interesting, isn't it? Because we think of the frontal cortex as being the part where your waking consciousness is controlled by your will and judgment and put to sleep when you have too much alcohol and you lose control of, you lose your inhibitions. Sometimes that's a good thing, other times this isn't. And he puts memory in the back part of the brain, back part of the head. So is he right about that? Well, I don't know. I leave it to you to think. But he also talks about the connections with something higher. And we see this here. This is a blow up of that top part of the diagram. In this diagram, Flood shows how we have in our head a kind of radio receiver for the divine. So in here we have the part he calls ratio, rationality. Hic anima est. Here the soul is. And he's looking at the area of the brain where we have these ventricles in the brain and the pineal gland dangling in the ventricles. And he's seeing a connection here going up to the divine. And these parts here, written here, dominations, virtutes, virtues, those principatus, principles, archangels, potentates, thrones. So those are all the, and you've got two more at the top here, seraphim and cherubim. the 9 choirs of angels that surround God in the old tradition. And then in the middle up here, you've got God himself. You've got Pater, Filius, Spiritus Sanctus, Father, Son, and Holy Ghost, and transmitting down through the angels into the head and the soul, the connection there. So in our heads, a kind of radio receiver for the divine. Of course, he didn't know about radios as they weren't invented. Of course they weren't. But he did know that we have ventricles or a void in our brain and believed that this is where the soul, anima, resides. So he's written that there, hic anima est. Here the soul is. He also saw this part of the brain, most likely the pineal gland, which dangles inside the ventricles, as I said, as the link between our own mind and the intellect with the higher mundus intellectualis. Yeah, the mundus is written over there, over the top of God, mundus intellectualis, the world of the intellect, or centered on God. So he saw the higher mind, the mind of God, outside of ourselves, but able to connect with our higher mentation inside ourselves, with our soul residing inside the ventricles of the brain and with a radio antenna of the pineal gland. So this is a very advanced thinking for 400 years ago. So practical steps for analyzing dreams. 1, you have to learn the language of the unconscious mind. In general, it communicates in the form of symbolism. Some symbols are easy to interpret, e.g., a shower of gold coins may well mean money coming your way. So you dream of a shower of gold coins. It might well mean that money is coming your way if it's to do with the personal unconscious. Symbols can be very personal, so that only you can understand them in their context. So your dream of gold coins doesn't mean that I'm going to have money coming my way. So if you dream of sacks of coal, maybe that's the opposite. I don't know. Depends on your own interpretation, what things mean to you personally. Other symbols are much harder to decode. In order to work on your dreams, you need to first write them down. Yes, that's a very important thing. If you really want to get to know and understand dreams, you need to start keeping a dream journal. If you're new to this, start a dream journal and keep it close by you at night. Try to write down the dream immediately on waking while you still have it in mind. So don't wait until you've had your breakfast and then you're ready to get on with your day. You'll have forgotten the dream by then, or most of it. You might have some of it, but you'll have forgotten the detail. Write it down as soon as you can on waking. And at first that'll be very difficult. But if you do that and you do it regularly, your mind will adjust to that and will understand that you want to record things and will keep the dream alive in you longer. It's a bit like if you start doing weight training, you can't lift 200 kilograms straight off. You maybe can only lift 20 kilograms, a tenth of it. If you want to lift 200 kilograms, you're going to have to go to the gym and really work out and develop your muscles, develop your body, become a weight trainer, and a weightlifter. And it's the same with your mind, your unconscious mind. If you want to become like Daniel, able to work with dreams and see angels and so on, you've got to work on it. You've got to want that, and you've got to take the trouble to learn the skills. Now, obviously, to some people are going to be much better at this than others. It's like if I wanted to play the piano, I have no gift that way. At least I don't think so. Meanwhile, I have a granddaughter who's absolutely brilliant at playing the piano, has a natural gift for it. So other people have gifts for art or gifts for writing or gifts for doing mathematics. We all have our own gifts. And it's the same with dream analysis. Some people are going to be very good at it. They have a natural empathy for this kind of work. Others, it's going to be difficult, but we can all progress to some extent. And if you make the effort, you will find that your dreams will respond and become much clearer, and you'll get more from them. So you will probably find you get a series of dreams. This is if you're writing them down. And in the course of these dreams, symbols will evolve so that you understand them better. Yes, so what starts out as one thing, in a different dream, you recognize that the archetype has actually moved on and changed and developed. Jung talks a lot about this in his books, so I'm not inventing this. Maybe he was. I don't think so, because I've actually found this to be true. You'll get if you have a series of dreams, you'll see how the dreams themselves are taking you on a little journey and elaborating something to you about the part of yourself that you're unconscious to, and you can confront. And I could tell you some stories on that, but maybe another time. Jung suggested painting a picture, or maybe more than one, representative of your dream. So even if you have no artistic skills, this can be helpful in making the content more conscious. So the act of painting a picture can help you make things conscious that weren't. And even if if the picture's awful from an artistic point of view, that doesn't matter. What matters is that in the act of painting, you're introducing a different skill. You're using your hand as well as your mind and eye to do things. You can also chant your dream or speak it out loud using your voice. There are many different ways of doing this, but all aimed at making the dream more real, more conscious, so that you can assimilate its contents much better. By acknowledging the existence of the unconscious mind, you'll find you increase your intuitive ability in general. In due course, you'll learn to differentiate between dreams that are personal and others that are common to the human condition. Now then, developing prophetic skills through dreaming. Remember, we were talking about Daniel and the prophetic dreams. And true prophecy, as opposed to fake prophecy, comes from the divine mind, which is to say, God. If your radio is switched off, you'll not get these. I think that's fairly clear. If I want to listen to Radio 4, say, or Radio 1 on the radio, I've first got to turn on the radio. I've got to have an antenna, a suitable antenna plugged into the radio, or it won't pick up the signal. And the radio's got to be tuned in on the right frequency. And it's got to be supplied with electricity from the mains to drive it. Well, it's all that is the same with your radio and your antenna. Your antenna, as I said, the pineal gland. And the energy that drives your radio, well, that's manufactured by your body. Your body runs on electricity. Your brain runs on electricity. All of the other stuff that you put in your tummy and digest as food, and your bloodstream and your breathing, all that is geared towards making electricity, which is done in your cells. But that's, again, a whole other big subject. I'm not going to go into it here, but it makes sense that you've got to have your radio switched on, or you're not going to get it. It therefore stands to reason that if you don't believe in God, but take the stance that everything just happens without the need for input from divine intelligence, you're unlikely to be given prophetic insight. Your radio is switched off. Yeah, so if you're a declared atheist, to say there's, Darwin's explained it all, we were just slime that, evolved, we're just intelligent monkeys, nothing more, nothing more need be said. And this planet, as far as we know, is the only one that has life on it. We live in a dead universe. Yeah, well, if that's your attitude, you're not going to get prophecy, or you're not going to get prophetic insight. You're not going to get much insight at all, actually. You're in for a big shock when you die. I can tell you that. But your radio is switched off. So you've got to have some kind of respect for your creator. People asked Jesus what his laws were. And he said, you've got to love God with all your heart and all your soul, and love your neighbor as yourself. That was the 2 commandments, wasn't it? Well, people remember the second one and say, oh, I've got to love my neighbor. That means I've got to be charitable and nice. But they forget the first one. Yeah, you've got to love God, and you need to worship God and admit and say, thank you. Thank you for creating me. Thank you for creating this world. Thank you for, being you and allowing me to be me. It's not too much to ask to say thank you, is it? For your life and your experience and your possibility for self-development. It's not a lot to say thank you, but people don't. They take it all for granted, and they even insult. Well, don't be surprised if you don't get important dreams. You have free will, and that means you can believe what you like. However, prophetic insights don't just happen. If you are cut off from God, then you will not be given them, or at least very, very rarely. So don't expect to get huge insight like Flood did, for example. He was a man of God. He was a man, he wasn't a priest. I don't think so. He was a researcher who was, looking with open eyes and wonderment at nature, wanting to know more and understand more, which is, I think, the right attitude. And because of that, he was shown things, and things were taught to him, and he was able to connect. That's what I think, is the true role of what he calls a Rosicrucian, but that's a whole other subject. So, if you're cut off from God, then you'll not be given them, or at least very rarely. This is what the word materialism really means, a belief that only the material world exists, and a denial of the supernatural. It doesn't mean being rich or desiring riches, but rather worshipping the material world as the only reality. So materialism means you only believe in the material world. Yeah? Very often materialistic people are interested in riches and exploiting the material world, but that's not what it means. And you can be materialistic, or you can be obsessed with materialism without being rich. You can be as poor as a church mouse and still be materialistic, in that you only believe that there's the material world and nothing else, certainly nothing supernatural, exists. And if you take that attitude, if you're like that, you're not going to experience the supernatural. You're not going to have that entering into your life, and you're not going to be given prophetic insights. Conversely, if you love God as your creator, he is much more likely to want to communicate with you. And this can take the form of clairvoyance, clairaudience, divine intuition, and also prophetic dreams. And this was Daniel's secret. He first prepared himself by admitting his faults to God. If you read the book of Daniel, he does this. He confesses his sins. You think, what sins did he have? He seems to be an ideal person, a model to us all. And yet he was aware that he has his faults, and he confesses his sins and asks for forgiveness. Yeah, we can all do that. And I don't mean going to a Catholic church and to a confessional and confessing to some old priest who's sitting there. And you don't have to do that. I mean, you can do that if you want to, but confess to God. God can hear you, you know. Confess your sins and say, sorry. I wish I'm very sorry I did that. And I'll try and make recompense. sometimes he, that's Daniel, would fast as well as pray. Yeah, one of his later prophecies, he spends 3 weeks fasting. And he gets eventually, he gets a visitation from the being that visits St. John in the Revelation, the beginning of Revelation. He calls the first and the last, the Alpha and the Omega. If you compare the description of the Alpha and the Omega in the Apocalypse of St. John with in the last couple of chapters, when this being appears to Daniel, it's the same being. And it's actually, I believe, the Christ that he meets with, and he's given insight into what's going to happen at the end of the world, which is our own time, by the way. So, as a result of his evident love of God, he was rewarded with great intelligence. Daniel's a very bright bloke. The ability to see and converse with angels, and also the ability to interpret dreams, whether his own or those of others. So he's able to get the dream of the king and interpret it for him, which, by anyone's account, I mean, I think even Jung would be pretty impressed with that. Meanwhile, the magicians, the enchanters, sorcerers, and the Chaldeans could not begin to guess the king's dream, let alone interpret it. They were materialists and were not connected to the mind of God. It's simple as that. So, if you'd like to learn more about my work, please visit the website invisiblecollege.uk. There are many lectures listed there, free of charge, about 100 lectures, most of them about an hour long, and I'm giving them to you free. If you'd like to go deeper, then become a member of the college. That's the Invisible College. I've set this up as a service to those who want it. This is easily done through patreon.com/Adrian G. Gilbert. Membership is from as little as £5 a month. You pay more if you want to. There are tiers of membership. For this, you get access to even more video material and also to a regular newsletter, usually sent out once a week. So there's quite a few people who've joined already, and you can kind of join our community. It's not a cult. You're perfectly free to come and go. I don't want anything more from you. I've set a membership fee because I think people need to show their commitment in one way or another, and that's the best way of doing it. But it's only £5, and that's only not enough to buy me a pint of beer in London. So it's not a huge burden, and for that you get newsletters, you get more videos. I still put some videos on YouTube for free as well, but take it at your own pace, and hopefully you'll find this material useful and help you in your own transformation as we prepare for what I believe are going to be massive earth changes coming in the very near future. So there you have it, my friends and visitors, if you haven't come to this channel before. I hope you enjoyed that little lecture. I know the whole subject of dreams and dream interpretation and dream analysis is absolutely huge. So I've only touched and scraped a little bit on the surface, but I hope it's enough to get you started. And do read those books by Jung. Read his autobiography, Memories, Dreams, Reflections, and that will help you. If you want to go into the deeper books, that's up to you. But remember this, if you want to know about your dreams, write them down. Try to do it as soon as you wake up, and you will start seeing patterns emerging in the dreams, and you'll start getting there. And don't forget, if you want to be a prophet, if you want to have prophetic dreams, if you want to have clairvoyance and supernatural abilities, show some respect for your maker. Thank you, and we'll speak again.